Some wonderful things happening on Scratch. I love seeing what you guys are doing. Any time that you post to Edmodo, it's really great. Okay, so it looks like I've been using the 8 p.m. Pong I meant to use. Go ahead and save that. 7 p.m. with the last class. So this is about where your Pong game should be. So go ahead and open your Pong game as soon as you get a chance. Yeah, I think that you did miss the last webinar, Rachel. I don't remember you being there. So this was from last week's webinar. So if you ever miss a webinar, it's not a big deal, but please do watch the recording to get caught up. We made this game last class, and we're going to be making mods to it this class. So you can either watch this webinar then, just make sure that you catch up by watching the last recorded webinar because we will be moving forward right then. So I can post the file. I think I actually did. There we go. Here, I'll share this with you all as well. This is my Scratch game that you guys can download, but I do want you to build your own. But for right now, I'm posting it so you can join us in class. That being said, I'm gonna have to move forward with class right now. So download as quickly as you can to try to keep caught up. Just checking a notification there. Okay, so Hannah and Rachel, I hope that answered your question more. It's up on Scratch now. I can't send you the file through GoToWebinar, so that's the quickest thing I can do. So this is the way that the Pong game works. So as a refresher for those of you who were here, and for those of you who weren't, we have a paddle that if the right arrow key is being pressed, this paddle is going to move to the right 10. And if the left arrow key is being pressed, paddle is going to move to the left, negative 10. It's going to move negative 10, which pushes it into the left direction. Now these two if-then statements get checked continuously many, many times a second. They're in this forever loop, and basically it's checking, even right now, many times a second to see if I'm going to press the right arrow key or the left arrow key. All right. The lava does not have any code, or it might, but we can ignore that code. That was just me trying to explain a mod to someone. Hey, raise your hand if you can hear me. Uh-oh, okay, good. Oh, thank goodness. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Good. Okay, so paddle, pretty simple. Lava has no scripts. The ball is where the majority of the code takes place. The majority of the game takes place. So we have this hat block. You know, in the paddle, the hat block says when the green flag is clicked. For the ball, we're going to have it work when the space key is pressed. And that way, we can restart the game if, you know, if we lose, if the ball hits the lava. So these first 3 blocks are initial condition blocks, setting score to 0, because our game tracks the score, and we don't want the score to continue. You know, if we lose, we want our score back to 0. So we have an initial condition here that sets the score back to 0. We have the ball move to the center of the screen, and then we have the ball point in a random direction somewhere between -80 and 80. And if it's pointing all the way to the right, which is kind of the norm in Scratch, everyone's eye should be on my screen because I'm messing around with this. -80 to 80 looks like this, and I'm pulling this little blue thing to show you. From up to the right to up to the left. Now there's an extra piece of code in there, the turn 15 degrees, that you all do not need. You can throw this away. Wow, Rachel, you catch up very fast. Yes, you do. Create a variable. Okay. So the way this works, now we have our forever loop. It's going to check for many things. It's going to first check to see if the ball is touching lava. If the ball is touching lava, game is over. So we can see that. Ball touched lava. This script gets stopped. I can press spacebar to start again, but if not, game is over. If the ball is touching the paddle, score changes by 1 and increase by 1. And then also these 2 lines flip the direction of the ball. So if the ball hits here, instead of being pointed down towards the paddle, it's going to flip it so that the ball is pointed up away from the paddle. And it's going to rotate somewhere between 60 and -60 degrees so that it hits the paddle, reverses direction, and starts moving up away from the paddle. If it's on the edge, you need to reverse direction so that if it's going left, about to hit the wall, when it hits the wall, it needs to start moving right. If it's going down, about to hit or up, about to hit the ceiling, it needs to start coming down. This block, I know, does not look like an if statement. The if statements we used before, it's not yellow. It doesn't encase things. That's just because it's built into the game. It has all its code built in to make it really easy to make a bouncing ball. Scratch did that to help, even though in some ways it's a little confusing. But you can think of it just like that. So if ball is on the edge, reverse direction. Now, eyes on here, this is really important. Every time the forever loop completes one iteration, every time you move through these, your ball is going to move 10 steps. So if it's just in the middle of the screen, it's going to check to see if it's touching lava. It's not. It's going to check to see if it's touching the paddle. It's not. It's going to check to see if it's touching the edge. It's not. It's just hanging out in the middle of the screen. So it's going to move 10 steps forward. And again, and again, and again, and again, and again, until it's either touching the wall or touching the paddle. If it's doing one of those 2 things, it flips direction, and then it moves 10 steps. Right? If it's touching the paddle, it will flip direction and then move 10 steps. Move 10 steps, move 10 steps. Again, 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 until it either hits lava, paddle, or the edge. And if it does hit lava, it's a little different, just the code stops. Okay, so some people are asking about the set score, change score. That's a variable So you have to actually make the variable score. I'm going to hit cancel because I already have a variable called score. So at the beginning of the game, you want score set to 0. That's set score. And after the ball touches the paddle, if the ball touches the paddle, you want to add 1 to score. Now, I have a challenge for you. I want you all to try. I'm going to give you about 3 to 4 minutes. So until 7:19, I want you to add another variable so that instead of moving 10 steps, it moves speed steps. Now I'll actually show you what that looks like. So make a variable called speed, eyes on my screen. And instead of moving 10 steps, you move speed steps. At the beginning of the game, speed is set to 10. And every time the ball touches the paddle, speed should increase by 5. So go ahead and try that. And in a few minutes, we'll check back in with you. Two more minutes. Right, you guys are trying to move so that at the beginning of the game, the ball is moving 10 steps every iteration. Right, because I'll go ahead and show you this. If you move 5 steps every iteration, or every time you move through the forever loop, the ball moves slower. Than if you move 15 steps. Ball moves faster. So what if you move a variable number of steps? And you're going to store a number in that variable. At the beginning of the game, the variable should equal 10. And you're going to change that variable by 5 every time the ball touches the paddle. One more minute. Alright, does anyone want to tell me what they did or show me on their screen? You can raise your hand. No one wants to show me what they added for the speed? No takers? Raise your hand if you need another minute with the speed. I won't call on you. Alright, I'll give you guys another minute. Oh, okay. Thanks, Rachel. Gotcha. Okay, I know some of you guys are still working on it, and I hate to rush you, but there's a lot of cool stuff that we're going to do with Pong this evening. So I am going to kind of move ahead. So eyes on my screen, and I can show you what I did. So at the beginning, you want speed set to 10, so that right when space key is pressed, speed is set to 10. So down here when it says move speed steps, it's really move 10 steps. Now I have a change score by 1. I'm going to, under that, put change speed by 5. So every time the ball hits the paddle, speed, the number that is stored in speed is going to get 5 added to it. So if 10 was stored in speed, it would now be 15. So let's see what that looks like. Alright, you can see it in the upper left corner. Speed is 20, now it's 25, now it's 30, now it's 35, and it's getting faster and faster. Eyes on my screen. Using the looks block, how could you change it so that the ball shrinks in size every time it touches the paddle? Great, so Kate and Elizabeth both answered that one. You could change size by 10, but instead you would change the size by -10. Since we added this block though, just like we have to set at the beginning, we need another initial condition so that at the start of every game, the ball starts the same size. So at the beginning, we're going to set the size to 100%. So let's see what happens now. So my ball is getting faster and smaller. and I lost. When I start over, it starts at the original speed and the original size. Yes. Rachel is saying there is a block that will change the size percentage. You actually don't want to change the size percentage because that's set size too. That's the difference between setting the score to 0 and changing the score by 1. At the beginning, we want to set the size to 100%, or the original size, but then we want to change the size by -10, so that every time it touches the paddle, it gets a little bit smaller, as opposed to every time it touches the paddle, it gets to size 90%, because that would only work once. Oh, that's okay, Rachel. That was a great thing to bring up. Alright guys, we are going to go for a new challenge. We are going to make two-person Pong. And it's actually really not as hard as it may sound. It might sound intimidating, but it's really not bad. So these set size and change size and the changing the speed, those are completely optional. Those are not things that you actually need in your code. I do want everybody to have a good, solid two-person Pong game working. So we're going to right-click. How are we going to start? We're going to right-click our paddle sprite. Everybody should have their eyes on my screen. Right-click it under the sprite section, not on the stage, but down here in the sprite section, and hit duplicate. Now you'll notice you have one called paddle and one called sprite 1. You want to change sprite 1 so that instead it's called upper paddle. It starts at y equals 140, not -140. Go ahead and do that. So you change it to the second paddle that you duplicated is called upper paddle, and it starts at y 140 as opposed to -140. Alright, and once you've done that, change the name of paddle to be lower paddle. And we're doing that just to keep track of everything. And if you notice, right now, their code is exactly the same. And that, it might make it fun, I don't know, in some weird way, but we're going to change that. So you should have lower paddle and upper paddle. And currently the only difference is that lower paddle starts at -140 and upper paddle starts at 140. Oh, Amelia, I made these. These are sprites that I drew. I drew them. Paint new sprite. I just drew it by paint new sprite and using a rectangle. Okay, so now under upper paddle, I want you to change it so that instead of moving with the right arrow and the left arrow, I want them to move with the A key and the D key. So you guys go ahead and make the changes so that if the D key is pressed, change X by 10, and if the A key is pressed, change X by -10. I want you guys to go ahead and try that now. For the upper paddle. Okay. Oh, good, Rachel. Glad you figured it out. Alright, so eyes on my screen. The way that we're going to do this, if the A key is being pressed, change X by 10. If the D key is being pressed, change X by -10. That's for the upper paddle. And now the two should work independently of each other. Except when A, you want D to be pressed to go right, A to be pressed to go left. I switched those. So D to go right, A to go left. So now that kind of works. Of course, you don't have anything coded, so it won't interact with the top paddle. It's because you don't have anything coded for it to interact with the top paddle. But we'll add that in just a moment. The next important step is to duplicate the lava. So I'm just going to duplicate that. I'm going to tell that one to go to 0, 0. That way I know which one it is. There we go. And I'm just going to pull it up to the top here. And there's not really any, scripts attached to this, but we're going to call it upper lava and lower lava. So go ahead and do that. We don't need to change any script or add any scripts, but we do want the upper and the lower lava. All right, raise your hand if you need a little bit of more time. Okay. All right, does anyone need to see a certain screen? You can type it in. I'll leave it currently on the upper paddle screen. we're going to wait and to change the code for ball until everyone has their upper and lower paddle and their upper and lower lava. All right. So I'm going to move on to the balls code. Or let me ask one more time. Who needs maybe a minute more? Raise your hand if you need a minute more. No? Great. So if everybody eyes on my screen, and we can talk about the ball. So currently, if you look here, when you lose the game, it's checking to see if the ball is actually touching this lower paddle, or the lower lava, sorry. Instead, there are two ways you could fix this problem. The first is checking to see if it's touching the lower lava, or, and I'm using this or operator, it's touching the upper lava. So that's one way to do it. The other way, which is the way I'm going to do, what I'm going to show, is if it's touching the color. So eyes on my screen, because there's a really particular way that you do this. You click the block of color in that blue conditional. You click that block of color, and then you click the color that you want. Click the block, and then click the color. Now, if the ball is touching red, the script stops. So either this or this, you're done. So go ahead and make that change in your code. All right. So the next step eyes on my screen, I'm going to pull out this if touching lower paddle from the forever loop. And if you notice, when you pull this out, it also pulls all the blocks beneath it. So I'm going to pull these if on edge, bounce, and move speed steps blocks. I'm going to move them up, back into the forever loop. So now I'm just left with the if touching lower paddle, if statement. I'm going to right click to duplicate it. And then I'm going to move it back into my block below if touching lava, or if touching that color, but above if touching the edge. So that's a few steps. I'm going to let you guys catch up and do the same. So it should look the same. It should say if touching lower paddle, if touching lower paddle, and the exact same stuff. All right. So hopefully now you've gotten a chance to duplicate this if statement. We want it to say if it's touching the upper paddle. Now, someone in the last class asked this, why don't I just have one if-then statement that checks to see if it's touching the color purple? Well, that is because when the ball touches the lower paddle, we want it to flip in reverse direction so that the ball starts now moving upwards. If the ball hits the upper paddle, we want it to flip in reverse directions so that now the ball is moving downwards. So if the ball is touching the upper paddle, instead of pointing in direction 0, which is up, we want it to now immediately point in direction 180, which is down. So what this says, if it's touching the upper paddle, now I want you to point downwards and either rotate 60 degrees or negative 60 degrees. So it'll be rotating it will pick one point in between these and start. And so let's say it picks this one. When it gets to the move speed steps, speed is equal to 10. Now it will move 10 steps pointed in that direction, which will be this way. Okay, so this code is different because you want the ball bouncing upward here, whereas here you want the ball bouncing downward. Alright, raise your hand if you need a... Oh, where is the move speed steps? Ava, move speed steps is move 10 steps, but then you use the variable speed. So instead of moving 10 steps, you move the variable speed steps, which just means you move whatever number is stored in the variable speed. So at the beginning of the game, 10 is stored in the variable speed, which just means that you could read this line as move 10 steps. But as you continue to play the game, it's going to get bigger. So then you move 15 steps or 20 steps, and the ball moves faster. It makes it harder. Because we now have 2 paddles, I'm going to change it so that speed changes by 2 instead of 5. Alright, and now you can kind of play your game, and it should work. Any questions? Any other questions? I'm going to put out a quick poll that asks, how is my pacing for today? Was I too fast today, too slow, or did you think it went okay? Good. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Glad everyone thought overall, some people say a little slow, but the majority of the class thought that was a good pace. The great majority of the class. I would like to challenge those who were thinking like, hey, I could do it a little faster. Maybe think about different ways that you could add to the code, like that change size by -10. I'm actually going to, well, I'll leave it be for right now. Okay, let me pull this up. There are a list of mods. Okay, well, this is a good one to start with. Instead of changing just one score, first of all, I'm going to hide this speed. You see speed here? Eyes on my screen, I can click the little checkbox and it'll go away. Instead of just a variable score, I'm going to make 2 variables, one called player 1 score and one called player 2 score. Alright, I want you to think about how you could use these to track both players' scores every time the ball hits one of their paddles. So go ahead and try that mod on your own, and in about 5 minutes I will explain the answer. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or type it in and I can help you out. For right now, and notice you can actually click and drag these. about 4 more minutes. As a reminder, in case you zoned out, I want you to change the code so that instead of tracking 1 score, you're tracking 2 scores. 1 for player 1 and 1 for player 2. I'm going to show the answer in about 3 minutes. About 2 minutes. Make sure. I know I'm being really quiet right now. I'm sure those of you watching the recording are like, but type a question if you have one. Oh, good, Rachel. I'm glad you got it. Glad you got caught up. I'm duly impressed that you were able to catch up today in class. It's awesome. So, Rachel, you can maybe show us how you did it, and in just a minute, we're going to give the rest of the class a minute, and you're checking. You want player 1 score and player 2 score. All right, it's 7:55. Rachel, would you like to share your screen? Hey, Rachel. Would you like to share your screen? Oh, okay. Sorry. You absolutely don't have to. I thought you were just signing in. Okay, so I can show you. I can walk you through when I got here. So instead of setting the score to 0 at the beginning, we'll set player 1 score to 0 and set player 2 score to 0. This is an important step because at the beginning of every game, you want these to be 0. You want them to restart at the beginning of every game. If it touches the lower paddle, you want player 1 score, or P1 score, to change by 1. And I just made 2 more variables. That's how I have P1 and P2 score. And if it's touching the upper paddle, I want P2 score to change by 1. Alright, so now when you play, if you're a little bit more talented than I am, you can keep track. And there we go. Now, we only have a few minutes, but I can introduce this idea. let's go ahead, eyes on my screen. We're going to add Scratch Cat back into our game. So I don't know what this is, but we're going to delete this code. Oh, that's called Gravity Cat, apparently. Delete Gravity Cat. That's not what I want. You know what? It's fine. It can just be that A. That A for right now. We just need a sprite. And what I want bat A to do is when the green flag is clicked, we want, or when the space key is pressed, either one, so we want both of these, we want the bat to be hidden. So on either of those, so hide the bat. And right, on your game, it doesn't have to be a bat. Your game, it could be Scratch Cat or a little referee or something like that. But I just needed a sprite. So if you go to the balls code, if it's touching the lava, we're going to have the ball send out a broadcast that says game over. You guys can remember broadcasts from the other game. It's a way for sprites to talk to each other. And it's okay if you're not quite following along right now. You can watch this part in the recording. It's a little extra for you all to work on before Wednesday. So if the ball is touching the red lava, or either red, broadcast the game is over and stop this script. The bat is going to be listening, quote unquote, for game over. And when it receives game over, it's going to check and see if player 1 score is greater than player 2 score. And then I can, put it in there. And I can actually duplicate this whole if statement. So it says if player 2 score is greater than player 1 score. So once it receives that the game is over and that broadcast is going to get sent out when the ball hits the lava, it's going to check if P1 is greater than P2. It's going to say player 1 won. If P2 is greater than P1, player 2 is the winner. Of course, it needs to show before it does this, and hide at the end. All right, so let's try that out. Okay, well that's no good. Player 2 is the winner, so that worked. I mean, player 2 score is greater than player 1. Let me check why. Our touching color red's not working. Let me switch that out. Doesn't look like that one wanted to work quite right. So I'm going to have it do the OR. Oops. So what I said before, you could have it check to see if it's touching upper lava or touching lower lava. I'm going to try that. Alright, and the bat is going to see, when it receives game over, it's going to check who's kind of in the lead, and then it's going to announce it. Player 2 is the winner. Alright, it's a little after 8, so if you need to jump off, absolutely, go ahead. I hope I left you with a little bit of challenge to try between now and Wednesday. If you have a question, go ahead and let me know, and I'll stay on for a couple minutes unless I don't get any questions. If not, have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you all Wednesday. Alright, no questions? Alright.